Hello everyone, it is that time again, the time we search, analyze, and discuss philosophical elements within video games. Today's topic of choice, Octopath Traveler. As I've described before, philosophy is the Greek word meaning love for wisdom. Within modern times, it involves speculation amongst metaphysics, ethics, and even religion. Today, we'll be discussing parallels of these deep thinking topics within Octopath Traveler. As always, please be wary of spoilers, as I will try to be addressing as many plot points of the game as I can. So without further ado, let's begin. For this video, we're going to primarily be discussing the characters, and oh boy, there are tons of them. Octopath Traveler is a game where you can choose to play up to 8 different individual protagonists, and each of them have their own handful of friends, acquaintances, and adversaries along the way, making for a long list of characters and their different ideologies. To begin, we'll start with Ophelia. Ophelia is a very caring and protective kind of person. Her path action within the game is Guide, which is to be used in cases of side quests where you need to take a certain individual somewhere or into battle to aid you. Throughout the game, Ophelia shows much care to those around her. Her goal is to travel all over the continent through her own pilgrimage to light the several flames for her god, Albrecht. We can see in the way she carries herself that she values modesty and honesty. She is to be seen as a shepherd to those who feel lost, yet she humbles herself by learning from those more experienced and knowledgeable than her. Along the way through her journey, she'll encounter priests, a few mythical entities, but most infamously, a Satanist-like cult that forms to destroy her and her religion. The leader of this cult, Matthias, manages to trick Ophelia's adoptive sister into being a blood sacrifice under the idea that it will bring her deceased father back to life. Desperate for the revival, Liana, the sister, then became willing for the sacrifice. Without her father, she felt as if she had little to nothing else to live for. She loved and cared for her dad, and Liana's choice here brings the question, what would you do for your loved ones? Characters from comics, movies, TV shows, and more are always faced with this question when tied to extreme conditions. The entirety of the Saw franchise proposes questions to the multitude of protagonists concerning life or death. The Dark Knight's version of the Joker will make a handful of other decisions for Batman and the Gotham police force to deal with as well. And finally, one of my personal favorites is that Spider-Man must also make similar decisions of saving the masses or someone he specifically cares about throughout his movies. Now, while the questions may string more along the lines of utilitarianism, the choice that Liana must make is based on the value of her loved ones, something that's a lot more personal than that of utilitarianism. Anyways, moving on from Liana, we now have Matthias, who I mentioned a moment ago. Matthias, who was once called Matthew, was the priest for Albrecht. However, Matthias began to question and challenge his faith in the flame once his village was burned down by the lightning. He prayed and prayed, but to no avail. Thus, Matthias left the practice and teamed up with a woman named Albrecht, who we probably won't get into for this video, maybe for another time when it's more spoiler heavy, but Albrecht gives Matthias 100 free years of age. Throughout his extended life, Matthias finds himself eager to put other people's faith into question. He is of the belief that Albrecht is ruthless and uncaring and will always turn its back on its followers. Matthias's life resembles that of a turned atheist. Matthias was prominent within his religion, sharing the news that he thought to be good. However, when life went wrong, Matthias felt betrayed, and as a result, he betrayed his religion. Matthias developed from religious to skeptic to atheist. When it comes to Matthias's mindset and philosophies, we could say that he easily shares a mindset of fair trade and karma, a do unto others what you want done to yourself kind of mindset. Matthias takes this concept and twists it. Many people today, especially children, may view this mindset of, okay, I'll act how other people act towards me, when in reality the point is to evaluate your own personal desires of how you want to be treated and implement that onto others. If you would want to be treated nice, then you should treat other people nice, not the other way around, and definitely not for the purpose of personal benefit. Matthias does, however, seem to take this mentality and apply it to himself. Since he feels as if Albrecht betrayed him, he then betrayed Albrecht. Moving on from Ophelia's branch, we have Cyrus. Cyrus is a scholar. Now, not only is he a scholar, but he's a scholar with the mindset that all knowledge and teachings should be made public. While I agree with Cyrus's goal of enlightening as many people as possible, I will undoubtedly make the case that certain people just should not or may not want to know or care to know certain things. I didn't realize it before making this video and typing out the script, but Cyrus's view of knowledge could potentially be seen as a form of communism, I guess. Everyone kind of deserves a little bit of something, and that everyone should share it equally. I did find this a super and real interesting concept while playing through Cyrus's story in the game, and to a degree I admired it. I still do to an extent, but I feel like it definitely boils down to the specific information and how exactly Cyrus would plan to share it all. I mean, surely Cyrus doesn't mean that he would give the entire continent a lecture and the same resources and materials for studying, right? Within Cyrus's story, we have a handful of other characters that we can actually depict certain philosophies from. Starting with Yvonne, his quest throughout the game, as Cyrus's secondary protagonist, is immortality. He assassinated the previous headmaster, that way he could take his place and steal a tome from the library archives to achieve his goal. Using a blood crystal, he's able to supposedly become all-powerful and eternal, despite Cyrus destroying him. Immortality, for most villains and even for some real-life people, could portray itself as eternal youthfulness. Different forms of media have proposed the idea of immortality differently, but the common theme is obviously that the person will not die. I suppose you could look at Yvonne's desire for immortality similar to that of desiring youthfulness, with the attached subthought there being youthfulness is good. Next to Yvonne, we have Lucia. Lucia was Yvonne's assistant and actually plotted with Yvonne to dispose of the previous headmaster. After Lucia got what she wanted, she had also formed a plan to dispose of Yvonne later, once need be. Lucia is the last obstacle in front of Cyrus's way to complete the game. During their discussion pre-fight, Lucia tries to convince Cyrus that they both merely want the same thing: knowledge. While Cyrus obviously denies her proposal, the conversation shows their differing ideas of knowledge. As previously stated, Cyrus sees knowledge as something that should be shared by and through everyone for good uses. Lucia, on the other hand, takes more of the knowledge is power route and applies a sense of your typical bad guy greediness to it. It's a simple tale of good versus evil, but it's told in a way where the characters have similar foundational understandings of their desires. It's really interesting, and I was at the edge of my seat during my first playthrough of it. Now, after Cyrus, we have Tressa. Tressa is a merchant, and as such, she places high values on objects and treasures. While she lacks knowledge of certain items and their history, she does have a really good eye and a good taste when it comes to particular items and their worth. At first, and I even mentioned this during my Let's Play of Octopath Traveler, I found Tressa to be a bit more of a materialist due to how much she cares for items. Looking more into materialism though, I'm not entirely sure that I would agree with the idea that Tressa values items more than spiritual values. Without involving specific religious virtues, spiritual values I think would relate to your basic things like truth, justice, and things of that kind of sort. I don't think I would agree with the idea that she values material items more than those things. In fact, now that I think about it, her story does kind of set itself up that way within the first 3 chapters, but at the end of chapter 4, she decides to pawn a journal that she's been keeping with her throughout the entirety of the game. She views it as high in value because of her experience in relationship with it. She decides to get rid of it because she wants other people to have that experience and the love for the journal too. She wants to share that spiritual connection and value with others. Within Tressa's story, we have a few other interesting characters to look at. Within her first chapter of the game, she befriends the captain of a merchant boat named Leon. Now, Leon is a used-to-be pirate, but after a change of heart concerning his friend's death, he decided to take a much more simpler and more just life as a merchant boat captain. Leon was undoubtedly more aggressive and selfish during his pirate days, so much so that his prime phrase was actually the strong take, while the weak quake. This is a very aggressive mindset to have, and it's extremely apparent in the real world today. Applying the fittest survive philosophy to your life as a spiritual value concerning other people, in my opinion, is a very harsh and could be cruel thing to do. Hearing this backstory of Leon, I was pleased to see how far he had come past that life and the realization that he had. Aside from Leon, we next have Ali. Ali is another merchant who acts as Tressa's friendly rival throughout the game. The two have a fundamental disagreement concerning treasures and items and how to sell them. Ali uses selling tactics more akin to swindling while also being true to the buyer. He sees his form of trading as true and correct in order to make the money he needs to survive. Tressa, partaking in more honest work, doesn't make as much, but is okay with that considering that she isn't betraying her core values of trade. By the end of the game, the two have more of an understanding for each other's philosophies and respect them while still disagreeing. Moving on from Tressa's story, we now have Albrecht. Albrecht's story is quite fascinating when it comes to his philosophies. Albrecht is a so-called retired soldier. After the war where he lost his king and kingdom, Albrecht felt purposeless. He felt as if he had to continue being a soldier to some degree, but didn't know how or why. He lacked will, and it scared him. He needed to find a reason to hold his sword. For a while, the reason became vengeance. He wanted to find his previous brother-at-arms, Erhard, and discover why he had abandoned and betrayed his kingdom during the war. While Albrecht carried the facade of being rational with this reason for the first 3 chapters, he finds that Erhard now lives a just life and has dedicated himself to helping others. However, he ultimately challenges Erhard to fight and comes out the victor. Yet, Albrecht still lacks peace. Erhard is kind of like the opposite of Tad. Erhard's mission was to ensure the kingdom of Hornburg fell, and that he did. After he completed his mission, he too also lacked reason or meaning in his life. Eventually, he found it in the path of helping others. I wouldn't say that Erhard had a change of heart similar to Leon, because I can recall Erhard not regretting his decisions or lifestyle once Albrecht confronts him. I suppose it can be seen as a similar scenario to how the Avengers attacked and assaulted Thanos, even after Thanos found peace post-snapped and was living alone on a farm. Following from Albrecht's story, we now have Primrose. Primrose's story is that of betrayal and also vengeance. She dedicates her life to getting back at the group of men who killed her father, no matter the cost. She uses the lust of men to get what she wants and how. In a way, she can almost be considered an anti-hero. She doesn't kill anyone for the fun of it or anything, but I guess you could consider her killing to have been done in cold blood. She doesn't really feel remorse for killing the men who attacked her father and those who tried to manipulate her. Her story definitely is the most dark and gruesome, but I suppose because of that it could also be the more appealing to watch. The psychological trauma at the end of Chapter 4 is on a whole other level. For the most part, I couldn't really tell much of what was going on, aside from the obvious, of Simone or Simon or Simeon, I don't know, psychologically abusing Primrose, but there's just definitely layers of psychological studies there, I am sure. While I can't think of much in terms of the side characters from Primrose's story, the route she took for revenge definitely can be questioned. She sold her body and effectively became a slave just to get information on the men who murdered her father. Not even to get close to them, just to get information. She endured physical torment while still holding a cold heart to her owner, never giving in, and ultimately killing him. Her story shows the dedication that's necessary for events or trials like that, and I do feel it a shame that she'd have to live her life as cruel as she did. After Primrose's story, we have Alphen. Alphen's story and philosophies are probably the most interesting and exercised out of them all, in my opinion. Alphen is an apothecary, which is basically just a fancy word of a doctor, and decides to go around the world healing people who need healed. It doesn't take long for Alphen's philosophies to become challenged. In Chapter 2, Alphen meets another apothecary, Vanessa, who manipulates her customers into taking medicine that actually makes them more sick for free. That way they'll buy actual antidotes for outrageous prices. Alphen finds this dishonorable for a doctor, challenges Vanessa, defeats her, and after so, turns her into the authorities. In Chapter 3, Alphen's philosophy is tested again when he heals a thief named Miguel who becomes injured while thieving. Alphen is advised not to heal the thief by another apothecary named Ogun, who learned of Miguel's true intent. After Alphen heals him anyway, Miguel kidnaps a kid for ransom. Alphen then realizes his mistake and how Miguel was able to do that only because he had helped him. Alphen's philosophy is ultimately tested here. Do you help/care for bad people? Similar to how Cyrus and Tressa had characters within their stories whose philosophies rival their own, Ogun's rivals Alphen's. Ogun believes that some people just do not deserve to be helped, while Alphen takes the more optimistic approach of wanting to help everyone. By the end of Alphen's story, Alphen still holds true to his philosophy, however, he does noticeably become a lot more stern with it. Following from Alphen's story, we have Therion the Thief. Now, Therion doesn't really have much of a philosophy aside from that of a lone wolf. Therion believes that he can kind of do whatever he wants, whenever and however, for the most part. Therion doesn't really see much of a reason to go out of his way to help others unless he absolutely needs to or doesn't inconvenience him. Therion is your typical anime silent protagonist kind of person. Not much else to say for him, so moving on to our last character, Hannet. Hannet is a hunter, yet she has deep respect for nature and animals. She sees hunting as a just act within the course of nature. She thinks hunting is an art which must be done professionally, not something as an excuse to kill in a fashion of rampage. Similar to Therion, I can't really think of much else to say here for Hannet. They kind of do seem more one note, to say the least. Personally, too, Hannet was more or less a character that I was least interested in. Now, I liked her story, and I liked how it integrated into the overarching lore, but there wasn't much else there to dissect, I think, is how I would describe that. Well, this has kind of gone on for a while on enough, so I'll just kind of end it here. I can't really think of many more philosophical parallels within Octopath Traveler, but I'll be sure to make another video on it if I do, and until then, be sure to leave your thoughts and opinions in the comments below to show your support. So guys, this is Jake. Thanks for watching. Peace.